Hey guys, how's it going? So, just a bit of a recap on where we left off yesterday. So we finished setting up the data tables for the new game selection screen. So now we have a database set up, and we can add new playable levels, and for each playable level, a actual map can be assigned, which will be loaded when we go into the new game. And it can have some just metadata, such as a pre-title and description, which can be later displayed in the menu. We also got to a point where it's now dynamically adding those buttons, as we can see here, and they're using their fed-in data to customize themselves. So when those buttons are created, they will take in the data and they'll change the text, etc. So a couple of things I want to try and get done for this one. First, you want to fix just a slight issue where if I go back to the menu, start a new game, it repopulates the buttons. That isn't going to take too long. And we also want to add padding to the buttons, just make it look a little bit nicer. Then we're going to create the structure that holds the selection data. So we take a quick little look at all this. We're going to need a new game selection, and it's going to hold pointed to that view world, so that level that's been selected. The game mode, so once we add in that functionality of game mode, it'll be stored here, and additional options. I'm not too sure how that's going to work yet. That's probably going to be some kind of array of options that are either on or off or values, so I'll get to that. Here's a bit of a layout of where we're at so far. So we've got the new game selection widget. So this is the actual screen where the new game selection screen is. Then we've been working on the level entry container. So this is the container widget that is going to dynamically add the individual entries. And then BP playable level entry. So that's the actual individual entries going in. So in order to make those do something, they're going to need a pointer to the selection widget. So that's going to, in the hierarchy, that's going to be the main sort of manager of the selection. And they're going to call some methods such as set level selection or set game mode selection. And they're going to, because they've got a pointer to their relevant data, all they've got to do is just call that method and pass in their data. That's all they've got to do there. And it'll be a similar deal for the game mode selection. So once we've got this done, it'll be a pretty similar process for the game mode selection. Then we'll get to the additional options later. But this struct, this will be what then gets actually fed to the new game when it loads. So we'll load in the new game, and then we'll stream in the world, set the game mode based on what was actually selected, and we'll apply any options that are needed. And also, just to recap, the pre-game HUD, so the actual main HUD class during the menu stage, that's essentially acting like the manager. So it's responsible for creating the main menu widget, settings widget, this new game selection widget, and it's responsible for taking in requests to show either main menu or show settings widget, and it will handle hiding the other ones. So that's kind of like the manager of the main menu. So that's kind of what we're after, and yeah, that's kind of the plan for today. So I'll start off by just fixing that little bug with this happening. And the way we're going to do that, we're just going to clear, whenever we populate this, we're just going to clear the children before. And we're also going to move all of this to the pre-construct, because it's all being built based on this database. It's not going to change during runtime, so we can actually just have it loaded at the start. So we'll I can start with that. So level entry container. So this is the container, those buttons. Oh, stop that. So at the moment it's on construct. What we can actually do is move it to pre-construct. And this will also enable us to actually see it in the editor instead of just seeing it in game. We'll go in here. And what we want to do is clear the container. So this is just a container scroll box. Because we've now moved it to pre-construct, it's dynamically added those entries already in the editor. So we do a function clear container. Really straightforward method. It's going to take that container scroll box and clear children. Okay. And then sequence. And we'll call their clear children first. Clear children. Call that first. Okay. So the other thing I'd like to do is playable level entry. So this is those individual entry buttons. Similar, we'll move this to pre-construct because it's not going to change at runtime. It's all driven off that data table. So now we should actually see in our new game selection widget, so this is the actual container. There we go. So it's actually populated that container, added those buttons dynamically, and it's done it in editor. And now because we're clearing the children, it should, and we go back, yeah, cool. So that's nice and fixed. Just one other little thing I'd like to do is just add a bit of padding to these buttons. Make it look a little bit nicer. So that's going to happen from the container around about here. You can do that. Just so the buttons aren't right next to each other. Potentially flat. Take a look at that now. Cool. Bit of spacing in between, just looks a little bit nicer. There we go. Cool. Don't want to get too bogged down with design stuff right now. We'll actually get into designing it later once it's all functioning properly. Okay, good. So that's that done. So we'll create the structure that's going to hold the selection, and that will then lead us on to actually being able to manipulate that as we go. So in order to do that, it's going to be the same kind of finicky process as it was for creating the data rows and the data table. There's no easy way of just adding a C++ struct to the project for whatever reason. So what I've been doing so far is just creating a basic C++ class object, create all classes, object. So this will create all the files, and we could just edit it to be a struct instead and delete the CPP file. So where do we want this to be? So this is going to be relevant for both pre-game and in-game because it's been used for both. So I think we'll make it a kind of top level item. We'll leave it here. and new game selection. Yeah, okay, so that should be fine. Okay, and here it is. So it's made a basic class for us. We're going to convert this to a struct. So we'll do that. We'll delete the CPP file. We'll save it. We'll come out. We'll regenerate the Visual Studio project. And that should give us a struct we can use for holding the data. Let's reload that for a sec. Okay, so that we can get rid of. And it should have put it in here. So we can get rid of the CPP file. We're not going to need that. Get rid of no export types. Leave the generated. Change this to use struct. Blueprint type. And then about that. We can just also get rid of that. And we need to change the name to Unreal's name convention. So it's not. That should be fine. So now if we close this, save it. Under source, delete the CPP file. We'll also close the editor as well, just in case. And then rebuild the generate Visual Studio project files. And then it should compile after that. And what we'll do, just a quick test, just to make sure that's working correctly. I'll just create like a dummy blueprint and just check that we can add that struct to that blueprint. I'll just put something random for now. You put that. Anywhere. That's fine. Check this is going to compile. So this struct will hold the map that the player wants to have loaded in. It will hold the game mode that the player wants to play, and it will load in, it will hold the options when we get to that point. Okay, so it's built. So now we'll just go in and just double check that it's going to function correctly. Just any blueprint will do. That doesn't matter. Go to variables now, add a variable. And we should now be able to New game selection. Okay, yeah. So that should be coming in. There we go. Cool. Pile that. Okay. For some reason the stream is not. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Don't know why. Shouldn't be. Stop it momentarily. Okey-dokey. So we'll delete this. And now we can work on this now. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to create a soft object pointer to a world. Map. And we want this to be, we can read write, which we might be able to write to it. Edit defaults only. So we might want to set like a default. Okay. So then for the game mode, this is subclass. Of game mode base. We could make this, we could make like a base class for all our maps, just so in the editor we can only pick relevant game modes, but won't worry too much about that just yet. Game mode, and similar to that, we want to be able to read and write it in Blueprint, and we want to set default in the editor. Okay. And additional options I'll come back to later once I know how that's going to be structured. Cool. Okay, what have we failed on? Because the editor's open. Let's close that because we've messed around with a structure. Rebuild that for a sec. Shouldn't take too long. There we go. Cool. And again, let's just do a quick test. Make sure that's working correctly. So if we add that to this, new game selection, okay, and we should now see, we can pick levels here, and we can set a game mode. Okay, cool. So that's working as intended. Get rid of that. And we want to add that to the main widget right here. New game selection widget. So as mentioned earlier, the new game selection widget is the main screen. So that's acting as the manager. So that's seems suitable to store it in here. We need to include it. We're currently in widgets. And we've got that new game selection class outside. So okay, cool. And we're going to want it to be under protected so we can see it in the blueprint. New game selection, bullet play selection, add a new property, better so we can see it, and yeah, so we'll go edit defaults only, so we can set default for it, and blueprint require. So again, we want to be able to read and write. Okay. Add some comments there. Oh, let's put the editor only, so it's going to give me an error. So we'll do Control-Alt-11 to reload. And hopefully should be able to just go straight back into the editor. Cool. So now go to widgets, new game selection widget. So this is the whole screen. We should now see, we should be able to access that. Play selection. Oh. Okay, cool. So that's that set up. So what we need to do now is when these buttons are added, they need to have a pointer to this widget so that it can call its functions for actually manipulating that selection data. So we'll need to go into where we actually create those individual entries. which is going to be in the entry container. And we need to give it so here's where we actually create those entry widgets. What we need to do now is, so we need that store a pointer to the main widget class. Let's add that in here. Okay, widget level entry container. This is those individual containers. We need to add the need to include the header file for the new game selection widget. And it's in the same folder. Okay. And this is going to be protected for now. And we'll add the expose on spawn meta tag, so we can just feed that in straight away. Oh, I'm doing this in the wrong place. So we want to be in that playable level entry. This is the individual ones. We have that now. Okay. Oh yeah, so the same meta tag we've got here. So that allows us just to feed it straight in on creation. So yeah, you need to that's going to be a pointer. We'll pretty much just take this. We can actually remove the edit anywhere. That isn't going to apply. And blueprint read write. Yep, leave that up now. Okay. Now if we refresh this, okay, cool. So by adding this pointer and setting expose on spawn true in the editor, it's now allowed us to add that pin. So what we need is for this to have a reference to it. Which might be a little tricky. How we're going to do it. We've got our new game selection screen. It needs to pass a pointer. I could just do get actors of class. That might be okay. Let's do that. So container. So what we might do is make a sequence. The second one. Move this up. Class. Okay. No. So the other way of doing this then, a bit more manual. But if we do this same sort of thing, but to the level entry container, slightly junky way of doing this. And what we'll do is on begin play, we'll just set that. And actually, we need to make that public because of that. Don't need expose on spawn. We're not dynamically spawning it. So it's a bit of a faff setting this up, but we'll then allow those individual entries to call the main menu widget directly. Okay, menu. Okay, so this container in that variable. Struct. So we're going to get that container, check it's valid, and then we're going to set that pointer. And we should be able to, what do I call it? New game selection widget. Set and get a reference to self. Okay. Okay, cool. So now where we add those individual entries in the container, so this container can now pass that pointer on to these guys right here. This little bin. Okay, cool. So let's check that in the actual in here. So construct. Just going to do a quick check to make sure that it's valid. Get the game selection widget. just print that. And hopefully it's not bad. Okay, cool. Great. So cons when we're doing this, which is here, you might need to put this here instead. Go to that for a sec. Nope. So it's up to this point. The pointer, yep. So it's valid at this stage. I think the problem is this is already created. And then we're trying to store it. Okay, that's a little tricky. So let's just try. I'll leave that as pre-constructed anyway. It's a bad thing. If we just go down to entry level. Because what we could do instead is just when the button's pressed, we just search for that widget instead. As we saw earlier. Camel actors didn't seem to work as intended. Even though it should. Right. New game selection widget. So we might be able to get it from the game HUD instead. But we need another way of doing it. Let's just test that for a second. Game HUD. That's pretty fast though. New game selection. Okay. Okay, so we can actually just do it that way instead. So what that means then is we will get rid of what we did before. Get rid of that. In a container, we'll also get rid of this. launch container. Get rid of that. And we'll just close this. This could be a little bit buggy. So, can I get rid of that now? Best thing. Means we can also get rid of that. Get rid of that. Okay. So yeah, I think the reason why it was invalid is because we're constructing the just come down. Don't seem to like me doing that. Okay. Okay. And we should also be able to just get rid of it here. Yeah, who knows why. Don't know if it was maybe a typo or something that was causing that. Right. So delete that. Delete this now. That should compile. Cool. Alrighty then. So let's create the methods on the new game selection widget, which will allow us to set the selections. It's going to be in here. Okay. So I'm just going to take in this basically. And void set selected. Okay. Print callable. Okay. So that will update the new game selection. Callable. Mode. Okay. Let's define these now. Okay. We have to select them. Player selection, selected level. Let's just put this. Player selection dot selected game mode equals selected. Alrighty. Okay, so we made a blueprint callable. So now those individual entries, because they can get a pointer to this widget, they should be able to call these methods and pass in their levels. So let's have a look. Entry. Okay. So we've got the pointer to the new game selection widget. Hopefully, there we go. Set selected. Cool. All right. So we've already got this data in here. We take a look at playable level. So this is that data, right? Playable level row data. So we can split that, feed that into there. Okay. Finally, on the actual button itself, the series variable, which will allow us to do this. Okay. Cool. So we won't actually see anything happening unless we do some kind of printer screen. I don't remember how to. So we just called that. Debug message number 4. updating. At least we can see some feedback, just to confirm that is working. But other than that, there's no kind of visual feedback at this point, because all we're doing is just changing that struct. Cool, good, excellent. Righty, so that is that part done. So we're now dynamically creating the level entry buttons for the available levels the player can pick. Those are dynamically updating their titles, etc. They're being fed in the data from the data table, so each button remembers its relevant data. And then on there, on click, when these get clicked, they get a pointer to the main game HUD, so the new game selection HUD, so this HUD here, and they update the selection struct of that data. So when we then go to a new game, we'll be able to pass over that struct to the new game. Cool. So that's that done. The next part then is to do a similar thing with the game modes, and it's going to be the whole process start from scratch. So we're going to create a new table row struct for the database. Then we're going to create the database. We'll populate it with a couple like tutorial game mode or sandbox game mode, etc. Just so we've got a couple ones to play with. We then need to create a container widget, a bit like this one, and then we need to dynamically add those entries. So we need an entry widget, and then similar to what we've done with these buttons, they'll have an on-click function, and they'll get a pointer to this main outer widget to call the set selected game mode function. So quite a lot of steps, but it's pretty much the same process. So let's make a start of that then. Hopefully it should be a little bit faster because we've already got an idea of what we're doing. So it's going to be a similar faff with this. So because we're creating a new struct, and for whatever reason, no easy way to add one. Data. What do we call that one? So this is the actual row. Just reopen it. Let's see what I need the level selection. Playable level row. Okay, game mode row. All of that, I guess. So just like we did with the other struct, it's just creating the files that we need. But we're going to convert this into a struct initially. The same process, we can get rid of the CPP file. Change this to struct. change this to struct. Then we need to change the name in capital F. Get rid of that. And we're going to want this to be a data table row. So instead of it being that, we are going to, similar to what we've got in here, so we need data table and we need to make it F table row base. So that means it's a structure that can be used in a database. Data table. F table row base. Okay. Blueprint type. We can use it in blueprints. Okay. So that's fine. Save this. Regenerate project files. Then we should be able to build it. Building that now. Failed. Error found if table row base when expecting public while passing. See. So what this should enable us to do is go back into the editor and create a new database based on this. Okay, so failed on something. I forgot to delete it in the actual. So the remove doesn't actually delete the file. Bit annoying. So we need to go into source and physically delete the file from the system. Now we'll regenerate project files. So it's a bit of a faff adding a new struct. Would have thought after all these years, yeah, would have made it a little bit easier. But nope. Okay. I should be able to build this now. Here. And about, yeah, it's going to be a big project. So although I'm kind of stuck doing all the boring stuff right now, it's should be building all the groundwork that we need. So probably not so interesting watching right now, to be honest. Okay, so we can create the database, we can add the game mode row here. So we just need to actually populate what's actually going to be in here. So structs public by default, so don't need to do that. A game mode base. So this will be the game mode that is set when the new game is made. We want blueprint read only, because we don't want the blueprints editing this, but we do want to be able to edit it in the editor. Fine. Let's name. Better name to use. Similar here. And again, we're not going to be editing this during runtime in blueprints. So we send it for blueprint read only, but we do want to edit it in the editor. Okay. Should now game mode row. Should be able to select the game mode, bit title. Cool. Alright, sweet. So what we want to do then is in our in-game, let's make a folder here. Actually, this is going to be relevant to pre-game and post-game. So we'll put up here, play with game modes. And for now, we'll just put some temporary ones in. Sandbox mode. Duplicate that. Okay, mode, for example. Not too worried right now what it actually is. So now we can actually put those in. Sandbox mode. Put name of sandbox. Okay. Campaign mode. Okay, so this is the database that the new game selection screen is going to use to populate the entries. So the next step then, widgets. So we now need to do something similar to what we've got here. So we need a container that's going to hold the entries in it. That container needs a pointer to that database. So we need to be able to make that editable. We then need to make an entry widget for each individual entry. And that container then needs to go over that database, and for each entry in the database, it's going to add an individual entry to it. So let's start with that container then. Let's type user widget. Put it in this folder that we've been using. We're going to call this create that. And then We have to make a blueprint version of that. So we deal with this. Actually, while we're on it, we'll create the entry as well. A bit of user widget, widgets, playable thing. So this is going to be the individual entries. Let's pick that. And it looks like we're going to have to close the editor because that last widget we created isn't showing up here. Yeah, the builder fails. Just get rid of that. Okay, so that's why it fails, because it just automatically adds that, which shouldn't be because they're located in the same folder. Alrighty, so got our game mode entry container. And our playable game mode entry. Okay. Just write some comments here. Okay. Okay, so this entry container needs a pointer to a data table. And then in the editor, we'll be able to set that data table. I'm going to put it in protected because we're going to be doing that in the blueprint. We need, I imagine, engine date table as a go. That would make sense. Okay, we want this to be blueprint read only. We're not going to write to it again at runtime, and we want to be able to edit it in the editor. Okay, that should be fine. Let's check that. So we're going to go back into the editor, create blueprint variants of this and the entry widgets, and we'll assign that new created data table that we made to this. So that'll be the first part. So we've got the container as a reference to that data table. Okie dokie. So game mode entry container, create blueprint, pre-game widgets, and then this one, which is the individual entry. So just create blueprint versions of both of those objects. Okay, so this is the container, and here we go. So we can now assign that data table. Cool. So we can now on construct access that data table with all the list of playable game modes. You'll then be able to create an instance of the game mode widget, individual ones, and you'll be able to add those to each one, and you'll be able to pass in that data to it. Cool. So what we also want to do, a bit like we did with the levels, the individual entries, when we create those, we want to pass in the data table row. So that will be the way that those individual entries remember what they're actually referring to. And then when we create these, we'll just pass in, as the container iterates through the data table, we'll expose on spawn, and we'll be feeding that row to that entry. Next row in the database, create the entry, pass in that row. We'll do that. So it's going to need, that's always last. Separate these. So we're currently in the widgets folder, and we need game mode row, which is in the data folder. So we need to go up one level into data. Cool. And then game mode row data. Okay. Don't want to edit there. Do you want it to be read only? Let's just take a little look at what we made here. Yeah, blueprint read right. Don't think we need to edit anywhere. But we'll leave it there for now. So yeah, so this meta tag expose on spawn. So when that container creates this widget, you'll be able to pass in that row data. That should be fine now. Okay, so I'm going to do something similar to what we did with the level entry container. So in the designer, we'll have a vertical scroll box. Scroll box. Okay. And so this will be the actual element that we add those entries to. Then on the new game selection widget, should be able to find BP game mode entry container. Okay. And for now, we'll just do something similar to what we've done with the levels. So size we got 300, 600. Let's keep that the same for now. Alignment Y, 5 sprint to the middle. There we go. Okay, that would be position as 250. So, yeah, negative. Cool. Alrighty. So we now have the container. It has the database. I've got it positioned on the screen. Now all I need to do is just access that data table and start adding those entries. Which is reasonably straightforward. So in our container widget, we've got the scroll box. We'll start by clearing. Let's get a container. Clear children. We'll collapse this to a function. Container. So that'll just stop it like stacking. If you sort of open a menu, close it, open it. So now we can actually create the function up for create entries. Let's make sure to call that. So we need the pointer to the data table, which we put here. So playable game mode data table. There we go. Need to get the row names. So that essentially gets all the row keys, so we can iterate through them and get the actual rows there. Kind of a odd way of doing it, but it seems to be the standard way. Then that will give us the individual key for each row. Now we can actually get the row. Okay. Step back to there. Okay. So now we'll actually create the widget. Now we're creating where is it? Did think we already made that. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so the individual entry. And for now, this is going to be a button. Some text, which for now won't really do anything. Okay, so playable game mode entry. Okay, and cool. Now I'm going to feed in that row to that entry, and now we just need to add it to this container. Child. We should actually be able to see this now. We open new game selection widget. Yeah, there we go. Cool. So it's now accessing the data table, going through the rows, and for each row it's creating a new entry and adding that to that container. I'll just quickly add that padding again, like we did the other one. Let's add that. Yeah. Let's do it after. Now just neaten that up a little bit. Cool. Okay, great. Let me play that here. There we go. Cool. Doesn't do anything yet. So what we now want to do is in here on pre-construct, we should have access to that row data now. Okay. And just so we've got some visual feedback, we will adjust this text. Title, that variable, and we create a function, set text. Copy that. So we should be able to get the game mode name, and that's what we put in the initial. So this was the initial structure used to build the database. So that's been passed to this entry. So we can access that now. I'm going to take this text, set text, and we can just do that. Cool, good. So now it's displaying the correct name. Cool. And the final thing to do to make it actually do something is double click make it variable so we get the events. Create a function. Set selected game mode. Make sure to call it. And a bit like we did with the level entries, we're going to get a pointer to the actual widget, so this container, which has the methods for setting the so it has these methods for setting the selected level and setting the selected game mode. and using the information they have in their row, we're going to send that game mode to it. So just get that first. So we've got that. So we've got that game mode there. Need to get a pointer to that new game selection screen. And yes, so we're doing that by accessing the HUD class. And pregame HUD, okay. It's valid. Let's promote this to local variable. This will just allow us to move down the screen instead of it just being a really long line. Okay. Make a sequence here. And actually, it's not the part we're interested in. It's the widget. Okay, new game selection widget. Okay. Then we'll store this in the local variable. Okay. So now we have that pointer. We can access those functions. So selected. Given. Okay, cool. And a bit of luck. That should now be working. So we've got our two things here. Cool. Take select game mode. Great. Let's obtain the level. One, just have a little detail I want to do is set the defaults. So in our selection widget, should, there we go, play selection. So if we set our defaults here, test map, cool, good. And at some point we'll, when we've got a bit more visual feedback, we'll actually, when we dynamically create those entries, we will use those defaults and either highlight them or whatever the visual feedback will be. So we're now getting closer, so we can now dynamically add the entries for all the playable levels and all the playable game modes. They can call the methods to update the selected game mode and selected level. The actual widget, so this actual screen, keeps track of the selected level and game mode, and it's in that struct. And then when we go on to press start, we'll be able to apply that struct to the new game. So we'll be able to then stream in that level and apply that game mode. So a lot of foundation work. It's probably not been that interesting to watch, but yeah, just really setting the foundation stuff going on there. So kind of done everything I wanted to set out to do today. Yeah, so in the next one I'll take a look at doing the additional options, which will be similar process, but it'll be a little bit different because it won't just be one option we're sending. It'll be all the options, but those options will have different values basically. So that's going to be handled slightly different, but some of the elements will be the same. So we'll have a database for the different options, so we can dynamically add those, and not have to like manually hard code the buttons there. And then we can get into the actual process of when we launch the game, we then actually apply these settings, which will then lead us on to the load and save system. So we'll get that set and yeah, go from there. So yeah, thanks for watching and see you next time.